Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is SewRena and I am back with a new video. I may be in my Gertie era of the season because we are going to be working with her Lana bodice. I have made a dress from this pattern before, but I wanted to try making some alterations to the bust cups because if you follow me on Instagram or know much about my personal style, I really do like the conical or bullet boobs of the time period, so I wanted to alter the cups so that they're a little bit more pointy, and so I'm going to try that today. I really want to try this modification because if it turns out the way that I am hoping, I'm probably going to use this pattern even more than usual. So wish me luck, and if you're interested in seeing how I make this dress happen, go ahead and like, subscribe, and let's get into the fabric. For the fabric, I am using this yellow cotton gingham. This isn't as light of a yellow as I usually work with. This kind of has like a mustardy brown undertone to it, and I think it's going to be perfect for what I'm pairing it with. Because next I'm going to show you a tulle overlay. This is a strawberry tulle overlay that I found on Etsy a couple years ago, and it has really pretty strawberries, bows, a whole cake, all this really pretty embroidery. So this is the original bra cups, and you can see that it's mainly rounded off, so where it meets in the center it's going to be round, and we want to make everything come to a point. So while I didn't use any like technical skills to do this, I did use this diagram to help me understand the shape of a conical bust cup, and I tried to use what Gertie already gave us to be able to draft my own. As you can see on my new pieces, they're very similar to the original. I just straightened everything up, so now everything will turn into a point right here, and then I'm going to compare the two so you can see the two. Here are the two cups side by side. As you can see, it comes down in a more angular way instead of all of these curves that's on the original, and this will give me a more triangular cup. Now, this isn't as wide as this one is, and that's fine for me, but if you were to do anything like that, make sure that it's equally as wide as the other, so that way it does fit your bust properly, like you don't end up messing up the cup size. Also, make sure you add seam allowance to everything that you do, because Gertie does include seam allowance on hers, and I already went and put my seam allowance on here because I know that if I were to make this again, I am not going to remember to add seam allowance later. To start off, I interline all of my mesh pieces with the yellow gingham, and to fill all of those empty spaces, I cut out some of the embroidery and treat them as appliques. I use fabric fusion to hold them down, and then I go back later and hand stitch around the perimeter. I left a tiny bit of tulle around each of the appliques so that way I'd have something to anchor onto when I was sewing them around. And then I do a basting stitch around all of the pieces so that way I can treat all of my pieces as one from here on out. If you are not familiar with Gertie's patterns, she does make each of her patterns super customizable. So usually within the pattern that you get a lot of different views and ways that you can reassemble the pattern. But then also she goes a step further by making sure that all of her patterns are interchangeable with the different skirts throughout her pattern collection. The Lana bodice is really special because it has that petal bust cup detail, and that's why it's so intense and comes with so many pieces. What I'm making here today is essentially just the lining. The silhouette is simple, but I think the design of the fabric I'm using is quite dynamic, especially with the new bust shape. I cut the tulle layer out by first layering it over my already cut cotton pieces, so that way I can make sure that the design is not within the seam allowance and that I have more than enough space to add those appliques later, like I've shown you here. This tulle is actually a border print. It's like a two-way border print. So you can see a break in the center where the design starts going in the opposite direction. So also layering the tulle over your main pieces like that helps make sure that you're putting your design all in the same direction. Once all of your main pieces have been interlined, it's time for assembly, and I'm starting with the bra cups, so right side together, and you're going to want to ease these two pieces together a little. Off camera, I made a muslin before cutting my fabric to see if my pattern worked together well, and it did, so I am moving forward. For these cups, I like to sew on my smallest stitch length so that way the stitches are nice and tight. because what I'm going to do later is press all of the seams open to make sure that I have a really nice point on this. And then I'm going to go in and make some padding, which is going to really hold the shape because I have a very small bust, so I don't have the projection that would be necessary for really keeping the shape of this cup. So I do go in with padding later, and that kind of stretches it. So if your stitches aren't tight enough, then you can kind of see them separating a little, and it's not flattering at all. So I like to use the tightest stitch to really hold it together. Moving on from the bra cups, now it's time to sew the midriff on, and I definitely think that this was a little bit more difficult simply because I changed the shape of the cups and didn't consider the midriff when doing so. So again, that's why I didn't do a tutorial, because my way is certainly not the best way or probably even the right way, but it's the way that's going to work today. So if you've made it this far and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to do what SewRena did, watch until the end and then find yourself an actual pattern drafter, perhaps the closet historian maybe. After struggling to get the midriff on this, and I know it's because of my alterations simply because I didn't have these issues when I made this dress the way that it was meant to be made 2 other times, I move on to working with the lining pieces, which were put together the exact same way, only I didn't interline it with another fabric. I just used some interfacing to stabilize the lining fabric a bit. The lining I'm using today is a little bit of white cotton, and I am doing a partial lining because when I wear full skirts, or any skirt really, I am wearing a bunch of slips, so I feel like it's saving fabric by not lining the entire dress. This is a fully boned bodice, and I am just using the standard featherweight boning that you can get from any craft store. Gertie swears by the spiral steel boning. I just haven't worked my way up there, and I also don't think it's that necessary for me. My favorite type of boning is the kind that you can sew straight through that I bought a while back and I never repurchased. That's my favorite kind because you don't have to sew in the channels first. You can just sew directly into your garment. I follow her diagram for putting the boning in on the bodice. The only step that I skipped was going straight up the center of the bust because I did change the shape. There was no way for me to like bone that and also incorporate the cone shape as well. And I feel like I was able to make up for that shape by putting in the foam later. For the foam, I'm using a 1/4 inch craft foam, so this is affordable. I think you can get it pre-cut at Walmart, and then you can also get it cut off of the bolt at your Joann's or any kind of sewing shop. So in order to make the cups, you use the same cup pieces but cut off all of the seam allowance, and then you're going to do a zigzag stitch and make sure your presser foot is centered on the cut pieces, so the zigzag stitch will attach to the right and left and hold the shape of the cup. Hope that makes sense, but if not, you can see what I'm doing here. And this will give you the perfect shape where you can tack it into your lining or the main pieces, which is what I did here. So I tacked it along the center seams, side seams. I did a long basting stitch across the front to really hold it in place. And then I move forward as though it were not in there when it comes to assembling the rest of the bodice. Now that we've covered most of the bodice, it's time to start working on the skirt. So I used one of my favorite dress patterns, well, true vintage dress patterns. It's a gathered rectangle skirt, but I used it to make the skirt on this, and I used French seams, of course, since the top is lined, then the bottom has French seams, and it will all look really nice on the inside. While French seams is optional for the cotton portion, it's not really optional for the tulle. So do French seams there because you can see straight through the fabric. You want to treat both the underskirt and then the overlay as 2 separate skirts. So you're going to sew them together as though they're not going together. And then to combine them, you're going to base stitch, you're going to put the underlay underneath the overlay, and then you're going to base stitch around the top part or the waist section. And in this case, I just skipped that step and started gathering straight away to hold all the pieces together. Then you're going to gather down your skirt like you would normally, because now it's just one piece, and attach it to your bodice. If you're familiar with my work, you know that I always say to use the gathered part on top so that way you can always adjust your gathers. However, I had to do a little bit of easing on this because I had way more skirt than bodice. So when you're easing easing something down, you want to put the longest side facing your feed dog so the feed dogs can help you ease the longer piece down to match the shorter piece that's on top. To save myself the headache of having to hem both skirts, I decided to just hem the underskirt and then take advantage of the fact that it is a border print and leave that pretty embroidered scalloped hem on the end. So I just cut the skirt down the center. So I still have a whole bunch of this fabric left over, about half of the width, so it's the other direction. And look at that projection on the bodice. I really love it, and I'm glad with my decision to change the shape. I know this silhouette isn't for everyone, but it's a way that I overcome my very narrow slim shape. It adds dimension and has me feeling more comfortable being in a strapless bodice, which I was planning on giving up this year. I feel so confident in this dress and I cannot wait to wear it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. Please consider liking this video, subscribing, and leaving me a little comment down below. If you'd like to support this channel any further, you can leave me a virtual tip over on Ko-fi or become a bobbin over on Patreon. Of course, the best free way to support my channel is to like, subscribe, and share this video and leave me a little comment below. I look forward to reading your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!